She's working with Leo. Right beside Aurora is actually Aurora's daughter. That is Keela. Keela's 16 going on 17. She was born here at the aquarium. Today she's working with Sandra. And last but not least, the fantastic Kavna is the whale. Giving you a head nod there. She's about in her 40s. Today she will be working with Phil. Pretty awesome team of animals and trainers here. Let's give them all a round of applause, shall we? And despite the fact that we may not find belugas in our backyards, the lives of people and incredible animals like this are intimately connected. Hearing some sounds, that's pretty incredible what you can hear from these animals. But belugas like this, you're not as likely to hear sounds like that off the coast of Vancouver in the Strait of Georgia. So I'm wondering, how many of you know where exactly belugas tend to live? Most of the belugas, for that matter. Who wants to yell it out for me? I hear it over here in the Arctic. You are correct. Up in the Arctic is right. But belugas are not the only animals living in the Arctic. They are joined by creatures like polar bears, puffins, walruses, and even people. And the lives of these people and belugas are shaped by the extreme environment in which they live. Now, when I say the word Arctic, what kind of words come to mind? It's a very water place. Brr. I'm hearing ice and snow. That's what you're picturing. And if you look to Keela over here with Sandra, she's showing you her little tiny pectoral flippers. Because in fact, belugas, to adapt and live in this cold environment, feel free to wave back. Our whales are showing you just how small their appendages are in order to survive in that cold place. So for those of you underwater, you're having a chance to see the small tail as well. And let's think about it this way. In a cold environment, what part of you gets cold first? Your fingers, your toes, your appendages get cold first. Well, belugas, in order to deal with this, they have small appendages. So the least amount of body heat they can lose is really what they're going for. But even though belugas have small tails and small pectoral flippers, they are still incredibly powerful animals. They actually can leap out of the water if they need to. They can swim at about 22 kilometers an hour, or they can even wiggle those pectoral flippers, as you're seeing there in the center, and even boost themselves around, as you might have a chance to see later in the show. It's really impressive if you are a beluga whale. Now, these animals weigh about 800 kilograms, so for them to lift themselves out of the water like a captain in the center there is pretty impressive. So I do encourage you to keep your eyes peeled for any high energy behaviors that you might get to see today. Because as belugas are adapted to live in this cold place, people are as well. And in fact, we're talking about Inuit, who have survived and thrived in the Arctic for well over 5,000 years. They live up there too, and Inuit make up about 85% of the human population there. Now, while Inuit don't necessarily have small appendages like a beluga, but people that look just like us, they are able to live off of the land in a very unique way. And one of the ways they do this is how they get their vitamins and minerals. Because in our case, we can go to the grocery store on a daily basis to buy fruits and veggies to make sure that we are healthy and strong. But in the Arctic, you might only see a shipment like that once or twice a year. So you might rely on something else. We have Kavna in the center showing it, or Aurora here up front showing it as well. Keela's doing a twist up there. Our whales are showing you just how much blubber surrounds their body. And in fact, by consuming the blubber of a beluga, Inuit can get the same number of nutrition and minerals that we get from our fruits and veggies. So very important food source. And if you're looking at our whales, they also have a gorgeous skin layer on them as well. And what actually Inuit can do is use every part of a beluga when they do go hunting for them. So even the skin can be used for things like shoelaces. So a very good way to live off of the land. But one of the things we are seeing even with these adaptations in the Arctic is life is getting a little bit more difficult for these animals. And it's coming from the fact that their home is changing very quickly. And it comes from the fact also that as I look through the audience, I'm seeing lots of cameras and cell phones. I use those things too. I really like using them. But the thing is, every time we use those items, we are using electricity, which produces carbon dioxide gas. And what happens is that gas forms a blanket surrounding the planet. And if you look to our belugas, it's like the blanket of blubber that surrounds their body. That's keeping them warm. This blanket of carbon is keeping our planet warm. And where you're seeing this the most is in the Arctic, where animals like belugas live. But what exactly does this mean for a beluga? It actually has everything to do with the food chain, because as you see our trainers feeding the whales, they're eating a huge amount of fish and squid, but all of that food comes from sea ice algae. Now in the Arctic you have a thick layer of ice ideally growing, you then have algae underneath of it, and you have animals eating the algae, things like shrimp and crabs, you have fish eating the algae, and what you're seeing Aurora demonstrate here as she's spitting water is one of the ways that belugas can find their food. If it happens to be hiding in the sand, you spit water at it, you expose it, you can eat it. Very impressive. So not only will they find food that's hiding, if there's fish swimming around in the water column, they'll eat that as well. But belugas do have a wide variety of food that they can consume. But all of that energy and food does come from the algae that's growing underneath the ice, and any loss of that sea ice is a loss of the food chain that directly impacts belugas like you're meeting here today. But in fact, you know what? The sun has come out. Let's talk about somewhere a little bit warmer where you might also have a chance to see bobbing belugas like Kavna. In fact, in the St. Lawrence River of Eastern Canada. Now, is anyone joining us today from Eastern Canada? Couple hands. Welcome to Vancouver. Well, perhaps you don't rely on beluga for food value like Inuit do, but you might rely on these incredible animals for economic value. Now this is very different because you might have the chance to go out on the St. Lawrence and catch a glimpse of the roughly 1,000 animals living there. You're not as likely to see a leaping beluga like we're seeing here today. Do we have any more leaps that you might get to see? Pretty impressive. Now belugas absolutely can jump around, but a bit more likely of what you could see of these animals is possibly a head poking out of the water, but maybe you're going to see the back of these animals as they swim through the St. Lawrence waterway. If you look to the front of the habitat, you're seeing Keela's back, there we go, Cabinet and Aurora also showing you their back. Now you're noticing they have a bit of a ridge, that's called their dorsal ridge, and what researchers have discovered is they can identify individual whales based on that ridge, and it's as unique as our fingerprints are to ourselves. I actually challenge you at the end of the show to try to tell the difference between the whales based just on the dorsal ridge. But one thing our researchers have discovered is life in the St. Lawrence is as difficult for those belugas as is in the Arctic as well. And it's coming from the fact that they live very close to the two largest cities in Canada. Now those cities are Toronto and Montreal, but I'm hoping people up here in the audience can tell me, what do large cities produce that might not be the nicest thing for belugas to be around? Any idea? Oil, yeah, like pollution, right? Pollution is one of those things. What else might you see? Did you say noise? Coal? Coal, that might be with pollution. Well, let's go with noise. I thought I heard you say noise. Can't even talk anymore. But those are two concerns for these incredible animals. But let's talk about the pollution first of all. Because in fact, chemicals and toxins can end up in the waterways of a beluga's home. Now with these beluga whales, what happens is if they eat that kind of stuff, it ends up in their bodies. And I've already pointed out that blubber to you. It covers their entire body. About 40% of them is blubber. And what can happen is you have all that blubber ending up with chemicals building up inside of them to the point where the whales get really sick and they can die. Sometimes when these animals are found, they have to be treated as if they're toxic waste. So definitely not the nicest thing for belugas to be experiencing if they are living close to people. But I heard someone else mention noise. And as you're seeing, belugas are making a bit of noise as they leap around in their environment, but they actually are impacted by our noise in shallow rivers and estuaries. And this is very important for belugas because what can happen is in these shallow places, belugas will go in, they scratch off any extra skin that might be bothering them. If you look to the front of the habitat, you're seeing Keela demonstrate how comfortable she is in shallow waterways. And what also a beluga can do is go and give birth to their calves in these areas. Now I want to direct your attention to the back of the habitat. If you're underwater, you're going to see this as well. You're seeing Aurora show you she's heading up into the beach area and just how comfortable they are beaching themselves. Pretty impressive when you look at this. Now in these shallow areas, they will spend a lot of time making noise and teaching their young those sounds that belugas can make. But perhaps you've never heard the sounds of a beluga before, so if you listen carefully, you might get to hear what they sound like. sampling of some of the sounds they can produce. There is a huge variety, but as noisy as the belugas are, it's very important, and you can see how easily maybe the sounds from a boat or construction could really drown out the sounds that they make, making it very hard for baby belugas to learn what they need to know. But the sounds you've heard our whales make are so important to us because we have the chance for researchers to come here and work very closely with our whales thanks to the relationship our trainers build and maintain with them. And to tell you more about what it's like to work with a beluga, we're going to pass it on over to the center of the habitat to Phil.
Thanks, Lord. I guess we're going to let you see where my voice is coming from. Now, working as a marine mammal trainer can definitely be very fun and quite rewarding, as you might imagine. Get to build strong relationships with these beautiful marine mammals, and it's definitely something pretty spectacular and special. But because we work so closely with the beluga whales, one of the main responsibilities we have as trainers is to make sure that all of the animals are nice and healthy. By using that trusting bond that we built before on cabin